territory. We're on the traditional territory of the Michisagic Anishinaabeg people. It's land which is part of the Williams Treaty, and we recognize and hope to learn from the traditional teachings of people on this land. And today being Earth Day, this is a tremendously important day on which to reflect on those teachings. So I'm going to introduce Jacob. I've known Jacob for quite a few years now, and we've collaborated together a number of times. Jacob is the executive director of Camp Quarther, which is an outdoor residential outdoor learning camp in the beautiful Quarther Lakes, just to the north of Peterborough, Ontario. Jacob has done fantastic work at the camp, doing the most amazing work to promote environmental education and to promote getting kids outside. And he's talking to us this afternoon from Camp Quarther Environment Centre, which is an outpost next to Trent University, and it's one of the greenest buildings in the whole of Canada, implying all sorts of wonderful things. Jacob is also co-author of this book, the Big Book of Nature Activities, and I'm sure many of the things you'll be telling us about this afternoon can be found in that book as well. So thanks for joining us, and I'm sure you're going to have a very interesting time with Jacob over the next hour. So I'll hand over to Jacob. He'd like to take questions at the end, so you're welcome to post questions in the chat, which Brenda Simon from Natural Curiosity is going to keep an eye on for us, and he'll tackle questions towards the end of this session. So over to you, Jacob.
Thanks, Paul. It's so nice you're joining me on Earth Day. Beautiful time of year. I'm going to try sharing my screen, and we'll see if this works. Paul, can you let me know if you can see that?
Yep, we can see it now.
Awesome. So I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about a whole host of activities you can do throughout each season of the year. And Paul already did land acknowledgements, so thank you, Paul. I'd like to start off with a school prayer, which I think is really apt, this being Earth Day. It's not a prayer in a religious sense, but it's really an homage to Earth. So I'd like to read it because I think it's very powerful. It's not the whole poem. You can find this online, but it's by Anne Ackerman. She said, "In the name of the daybreak and the eyelids of the morning and the wayfaring moon and the night when it departs, in the name of the sun and its mirrors and the day that embraces it and the cloud veils drawn over it and the uttermost night and the plants bursting with seed and the crowning seasons of the firefly and the apple, I will honor all life, wherever and in whatever form it may dwell, on earth my home and in the mansions of the stars." I think it's a beautiful poem and a nice reflection of how we can honor and care for Earth. So I'm just going to move to the next slide. My work, I stay up at night working. There's one quote that really inspires me, and it comes from Seema Nugunda, a Kenyan youth worker. And he posed the following question. He said, instead of asking what kind of world we're leaving for our kids, we should ask, what kind of kids are we leaving for our world? And I think good environmental education is about precisely that. It is engaged, activated, empowered stewards of the environment. And at the camp, that's our work.
Jacob,
Yeah.
Jacob, your voice is breaking up a little. Maybe while you're sharing your screen, you could turn off your video. It might help.
Okay, I can certainly do that. Can you hear me better, Paul?
It's a little better. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
You're speaking
Okay.
nice and slowly, Jacob, and that helps.
Yeah. Often I speak too fast, so I'm.
Okay.
Anyway, back to the kids. It is a scary world we're giving our children, right? If you think about climate change, species depletion, habitat destruction, 7.8 billion people living on the earth, all trying to standard of living, it is hard. And from a kid's point of view, I'm sorry, I'm frozen. Trying to move to the next slide. You're thinking, hey, thanks, mom and dad and teachers and adults. Thanks for giving me this world, and you want me to what? Fix it? That's not easy. So if we're not careful, can scare kids into apathy because the problem seems so overwhelming, so daunting, and not within their scope of possibility to fix. But of course, environmental education has to be about fostering hope. I want to tell you a quick story which illustrates that, and maybe some of you have heard this before. But picture this. It's a beautiful sunny day, and there's a beach along the ocean. And an exceptionally high tide has strewn thousands upon thousands of starfish up onto the beach. Here they are. Their arms are curling in the sun. They're drying out. And there's a boy, maybe 10 years old. And here he's wandering along, taking pity on the starfish, picking them up, throwing them into the water. But there on the edge of the beach is an older man. His arms folded, he's chewing his lower lip, and he's watching the boy chucking these starfish into the sea. He finally goes up to the boy and says, kid, can't you see how futile this is? There are thousands upon thousands of starfish. What difference is this going to make? And the boy says, with a glint in his eyes, he picks up another starfish and hurls it out to sea. He says, makes a difference to that one. The point is, everybody can do something positive, and even small acts accumulatively make a big difference. So when we're thinking about environmental education, we're always thinking about agency. We don't give kids problems unless we give them the tools and strategies to fix it. And in doing that, we empower them. And by empowering them, we give them hope. You know this, I'm probably speaking to the converted, but just being in nature is one of the most hopeful things we can do. Building positive relationships with nature and kids helps us to feel connected to the bigger life systems that nurture us. Is it any wonder that kids today are feeling a bit alienated? And maybe that's because they don't feel that visceral sense of connection to nature. We can help as educators. We can get them outdoors. It's ironic, in our school system, we think we can teach kids about the rest of the world from the confines of the walls. When in reality, the world is a beautiful place. Let's get them outside, in the schoolyard, in the nearby parks. And when we do that, we reduce stress. Just seeing the color green boosts our serotonin levels and helps us to feel better. Take a deep breath in the next time you're outside. You're breathing in phytoncides. And those have been shown, which are emitted by trees, to boost your immunity. So simply being out helps us to be healthier. Studies have shown that when kids are back in the classroom after being outside, they focus better, they concentrate better, they get along better. So why not get kids out on a regular basis? And when we're getting kids outside, let's think about developing a relationship with nature in the way that we develop a relationship with people. What does that take? It takes hard work, it takes commitment, it takes intention, mindfulness, compassion. All of those things can be applied to nature too. So if you're able to take kids to the same place over and over again, you begin to build a sense of intimacy. They begin to see that spot not just as a collection of things, but as animate beings. My wife, Jessica, runs a little forest school, and she's so good about personalizing the landscape. What I mean by that, she'll say, hey, let's go to the Twisted Cedars, or let's go sit by Grandfather Rock, or let's go to the Whole Tree. And by using that language, kids begin to feel a sense of connectedness to the land that they're in. So imbue the land with character. Also, recognize that for thousands of years, our brains have been hardwired to listen to stories. And that's the way knowledge was transmitted before the written language. So when we talk about nature, we should talk about it in a storied format. I'll give you an idea. I have a friend who was a principal of a school, and he would walk to school every day, being an environmentally friendly principal. Along the way, one day the boy said, Mister, there's a bird running back and forth in the parking lot. What is it? Being a wise educator, he said, let's go look it up, even though he knew what it was. So they flipped through the pages of a Sibley's bird guide and found out that it was a killdeer. And one of the boys with a sharp eye noticed there was a little hollow and there were 4 speckled eggs in the hollow in the parking lot. They got a bit concerned, so they got some flagging tape and pylons to make sure no cars drove over. It was a nest. And then, over the next little while, those kids became enthralled watching that killdeer look after the eggs, sitting on it with her brood patch. Later on, when the eggs hatched out, she'd feed them insects. She'd do a broken wing trick when predators were coming or there was any danger, where she'd drag her wing and pretend it was broken to lead danger away from the nest. In that sense, she became known to them. There's a wonderful phrase from the Geography of Childhood which says, to really know nature, you need to look into every face. So that just wasn't any killdeer. That became their killdeer. They had a relationship with it, and afterwards they wouldn't let anything happen to their killdeer. Therein is the secret of fostering that good connection to nature, of telling stories and getting kids to be intimately connected to the characters in their landscape, to what some people refer to as their neighborhood. Now, this next thing, I'm going to give full credit to Paul. Paul attended a workshop a while ago about beetles. And he came back with a really neat idea, and I'd like to share that with you. It comes from Sherlock Holmes, that famous detective. Watson would always say, Sherlock, how do you do it? How do you do all these things? How do you know so much? Sherlock's response was, my dear Watson, you see, but you do not notice. Well, in the spirit of Holmes, I'm wondering if you could take 1 minute, and if you're nearby outside, grab a leaf. If you're inside, maybe there's a leaf of a house plant. If you don't have a leaf, maybe there's something natural within reach that you could grab. If you don't have that, why, you have your hand, because you're part of nature too. And then I'm going to show you what to do. So 1 minute, scooch and go, and I'll time it. Grab a leaf. Paul, is that better? Are we hearing okay?
Yeah, it's gotten a bit better.
Good. Modern technology.
It's a bit better with your camera off. It's still not perfect, but hopefully people are getting the message.
Good. Oh, look at that. Claire's got a leaf. That's a relief. Nice. Others? If you feel comfortable, put your camera on and show us your leaf. In a minute, Paul is going to make some breakaway rooms, but what we're going to try to do is answer the following questions. So I'll demonstrate. I'll give another 30 seconds or so for people to collect their leaf. Okay, great. So in the spirit of Sherlock Holmes, I want you to pick up your leaf or whatever you have that's natural, including your hand if you can find one. I want you to finish the following sentence. I noticed that. My leaf, I noticed that the veins on one side are way more pronounced than the veins on the other side. I noticed the edge of my leaf, it's got little tooth marks. In fact, the tooth marks have tooth marks, so they're serrated. I noticed my leaf ends in a point. I noticed my leaf, the stem part is sort of flat on one side and rounder on the other. I notice all the different colors that are in there. So in a bit, when we go to our breakaway rooms, I want you to answer that question. I noticed that. The next thing is, after noticing, what do you wonder? Well, I wonder why my leaf is shaped the way it is. I wonder why it's this interesting brown color. I wonder why this leaf has veins that run parallel to each other. What do you wonder? And the last question of the three that I want you to think about is it reminds me of. So this leaf reminds me of a ironwood. I think that's what it came from. But it also reminds me that in the fall, all the leaves fall, but in the spring, their new leaves grow. And it reminds me of just how lovely the colors of autumn can be. What does it remind you of? So, Paul, I'm going to ask you to do breakaway maybe for 3 or 4 minutes, and then we'll come back. Yeah?
How many people would you like in the breakaway room?
4 people, maybe 4 or 5, whatever's easiest. And we're going to break away from each other. Yeah, so I noticed that. I wonder, it reminds.
Nope.
And so if you've just joined us, everybody else is in a breakout room, but they're about to leave. So hang on in there. Our guest speaker will be back in a moment.
Uh-huh.
Well, welcome back, everyone.
Not quite everyone back yet, Jacob, but shortly they will be booted out of their breakout room.
That's great. Did you have a good talk?
Yes.
Nice. All right. Well, if folks are back, I can share my screen again. Yeah. So going through that process, what you could do with anything, it could be a stone, a stick, a tree. What you're doing is you're, of course, honing their powers of observation, as Holmes would have you do, but it also is launching you into curiosity. And really, curiosity is the engine of learning, as the people from Natural Curiosity well know. Inquiry-based learning, kids are born curious, and we can either nurture it or we can shut it down. So just being curious and recognize that for every one of the questions you pose, there is an answer. Like, why is a leaf pointed at the tip? Well, that's to drain water. Why are leaves bigger at the bottom of a tree than the top of a tree? It's because there's less sun and it needs to be bigger to collect the sunlight. Why is it colored green? It's because it's crammed full of chlorophyll to feed the tree. So, and that reminds me of is a way in which you can get kids to make connections between different things and creativity. So someone in our group said it reminded them of a boat. Cool. So don't forget to try that, to really honor the questions that kids ask and to do your best to try to help them find answers to it. And there are lots of cool things out in the natural world, just in your schoolyard, in a nearby park, from the holes in the trees. You think about it, how did that hole get there? A bird, a woodpecker, pecked it. But really, think about a woodpecker slamming its head against solid wood. How can it do that? Well, it has a reinforced skull, it has a stiffened tail feathers, 2 toes up, 2 toes back, so it can anchor itself onto the tree. It has special tongue that is so long that it's wrapped in its skull when it's not used and flings out and grabs the insects. And the holes that are left behind turn out to be great places for other animals to occupy as homes. Those leafy balls up in a tree known as strays are a wonderful place for squirrels. And try to make a dray on your own. I've done that with kids where we're gathering some branches and stuffing them with leaves. It's not easy. Also, think about the language of wonder. How often have I heard a parent or an educator say, "Oh, Johnny, put that down. That's gross. That stinks." No, really, even if you're uncomfortable with something like a spider, or in this case, a rat-tailed maggot, just use the language of curiosity. Oh, that's interesting. That's cool. I wonder why it's shaped the way it is. I wonder why it's colored the way it is. And you can even use some evocative language to help kids even be more curious. I say, hey, do you want to find an underwater jet-propelled jaw-thrusting bug snatcher? Who wouldn't? Go to a nearby pond and scoop out in the mud, and you'll find baby dragonfly nymphs, baby dragonflies that live the first part of their life in the water. And they're jet propelled because they take water in through their mouth and expel it out their rear end and surge forward. They're jaw thrusting because their lower jaw is folded and it's got pincers on the end that can unfold it and grab their prey. You can have fun with that. An insect grabbing wood slammer, a wind soaring acorn snatcher, a green faced sweet smelling sun catcher. Those are all different ways of describing the natural world, from a flying squirrel to a woodpecker to a cedar tree. There are lots of, and in the end, I have some resources. Great scavenger hunts you can use. I use something called Springo, which I made up. Like bingo, you have to get it on it. There's different discoveries. Here's one I love called exploration dice. And you can make these out of cardboard, you can make out of wood, or you can just yell out numbers on your own. So we'll orient ourselves, we'll figure out where north and south is. I'll roll the dice, it might say northwest 12. So we'll just take 12 steps to the north and the west, and then I'll say hunker down. And kids hunker down, and by their feet, they'll make discoveries. It might be a hole in the ground, it might be a chewed leaf, it might be a spider's web. These dice bounce you around the landscape to places you normally wouldn't go. One of my favorites is basement windows. So I go to the dollar store and give magnifying glasses, and I say to kids, hey, do you want to see a shapeshifter? Do you want to see an Earth submarine? Or what about a baby dragon? And we lift up rocks, and I talk about, oh, that's a roof of a home. We have to be really careful. We'll lift up a log. We'll peek underneath. Chances are we'll find things like millipedes, salamanders, earthworms. You think about a salamander, it's kind of like a baby dragon. An earthworm is sort of a submarine because they bore into the soil, they chew the soil and poop it out, but they aerate it. And something like a pill bug is a shapeshifter because they can curl up into a tiny ball. Kids are attuned to the very small. I remember one time taking my kids on a hike. We worked hard to get to the top of this rock. I had my daughter on my shoulders, holding the hand of my son. We got to the top of the hill, and it was beautiful. In the distance, you could see lakes sparkling in the sun. You could see trees. What were my kids doing? They were hunkered down looking at ants by their feet. Kids often have a contrived view of the environment. So set up micro trails, give them popsicle sticks and some yarn, and have them create a little mini trail within a few steps of each other. So step number one might be, oh, there's some interesting moss. A few steps over there, you poke another popsicle stick in, and you attach it to the string, and the string becomes the trail. And it takes you to places that normally you might not see. They're very small. I've been having a lot of fun with digital microscopes. They're not expensive. I bought mine maybe for $50. This is a piece of cedar up close. I took a picture of it. So I ask kids to go and find things. We look at it. We can study the very small. There's a feather under the microscope I got yesterday. One of the things I realize is, the time we're spending indoors because of COVID, really we're only activating two of our senses, our sense of sight and our sense of hearing. And even our sight is squeezed into a tiny box in 2 dimensions. We are sensory creatures. Rub your tongue on the top of the roof of your mouth and you'll feel all the taste buds like tiny volcanoes. You have 10,000 of them in your tongue. Or what about the tips of your fingers? If you feel the ridges there, and there crammed are Mesner's corpuscles, which are nerve endings. You're designed to smell, to hear, to feel, to touch, to activate all your senses. So Steve Van Meter was someone who designed a whole bunch of climatizing activities to help kids practice sensory awareness. So here are some examples of some different things you can do. You can simply go into the schoolyard and give some clothespins and have an empty frame and get kids to frame things. Sometimes just by isolating a scene, we see it in a different way. It's a photographer's trick. If you take one hand and put your thumb down and flip your other hand the other way with your thumb up and join them together, you create a little frame. You can decorate your frame. Well, you can even have close-ups or cardboard cutouts. Just doing this, you gain a new perspective in nature, and hence a new appreciation. Ah, the pirate eye. Ah, the pirate eye. If you just close one eye for 2 minutes and keep it closed, and after 2 minutes it's up, you switch between your two eyes, you'll see different hues of colors. Owl vision. If you take your two hands and stick your fingers up and wiggle them and start pulling them back on the side of your head, you'll see where your peripheral vision is. And normally when we hike, our eyes are cast forward, but by practicing our peripheral vision, we'll have a larger field of vision. And in that sense, you can also tell the kids to practice splatter vision. What I mean by that is often when we're walking on trails, exploring nature, we're looking at our feet. We don't want to trip, but we're missing so much. So splatter vision simply means taking your eyes and cast them forward, casting back, looking up, looking to the sides, really splattering our vision all over. If you take your two hands, do that now, cup them together, put them behind your ears and push forward. Simply by doing that, you amplify your hearing back tenfold. You can hear much better, and every season has its own soundscape. And in the spring, as the birds are coming back, you're hearing all kinds of things. We're going to do a little bird activity in a minute, but you can even make homemade sound catchers. I did. And they work really well. Just some cardboard shaped to fit the side of my head and held in place by a piece of towel. You can close your eyes and just get kids to listen to the different sounds they hear. And every time they hear a natural sound, they flick up a finger, and afterwards you ask, what did you hear? Oh, I heard a bird. Oh, I heard the leaves rustling. You can create sound maps where you get kids to pay attention from the different directions sounds are coming from, just putting them on a piece of paper. And this act helps people to sort of really focus in on the soundscape of your school. Especially in the spring, there's so many beautiful bird songs out there. And you can get to know them. One of the easiest things to do is use a little mnemonic device, and that simply means a memory device to hang on. I'll give you an example. This one. That's a mourning dove. The way I remember it, there's nothing to do. It's not hard to put a little mnemonic to each bird, and we're going to do an activity here. And what I'm going to ask you to do is just going to be some glorious Zoom chaos. In a moment, I'm going to ask you to unmute. And then, what I'm going to ask you to do is to pick one of those numbers. On one side, you'll see the name of the bird. In the middle is the suggested mnemonic, or the way that you can remember that sound. And here's where you really have to pay attention. On the very right of your screen is the time that bird starts to sing and the time it stops. And then it resumes singing again and when it stops. And what we're going to do is a little walk through a day in the life of a forest. And I want you to join in and sing. So, for example, if I say it is 2 o'clock in the morning, you're not going to hear much except for maybe the great horned owl who says, who's awake? Me too. Ho, 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 ho. Or the owl who says, who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all? Ho, 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 ho. So right now we're going to do a little test run. Unmute, please, or maybe Paul, you can get everyone to unmute. And just when I say go, do your mnemonic. So if it's a black cat, chickadee, hey, sweetie. So 1, 2, 3, go. Just do your mnemonic.
Hey, sweetie. Hey, sweetie. What's good to you? What's good? There's nothing to do. There's nothing to do. Sweet, sweet, so sweet.
Canada,
That's you. Look
Thank you,
at
nice.
you. Sweet, sweet, sweet. I'm so sweet. Sweet, sweet, sweet. I'm so sweet.
So what's going to happen is I'm going to tell a story. Pay attention, because in my story, I'm going to name times. And when the time of your bird, you hear it, then you start to sing. And when the time that you stop singing is over, then stop singing. So if I say, for example, 9 o'clock in the morning, a lot of singing. If I said 12 noon, not so much. So let's give it a quick try. It's a true story. I'm an insomniac. I can't sleep. So I was tossing and turning. Then I took my backpack and said, that's it. I'm going for a walk. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. I threw in a thermos of tea, a flask of rum, some sandwiches, and a sweater, and off I went. This time it was 4 o'clock in the morning, and I walked to a nearby hill with a
Who
big
cooks for you? Who cooks for you?
before I knew it was 5 o'clock in the morning, and the first rays of dawn.
Wait, I'm so sweet.
6 o'clock in the morning, the sun was truly beginning to
Sweet,
rise.
sweet,
And there
I'm
was
so
mist
sweet.
everywhere. At 7 o'clock in the morning, I had a
Nothing to do. There's nothing to do.
Canada,
There's nothing to do.
first over the
Sweet,
treetops.
sweet, nothing to do. There's nothing to do.
And at 9 o'clock in the
Nothing to
morning, the sun
do.
began to march
There's
north.
nothing to do. There's nothing to do.
And at
There's
6
nothing
o'clock
to
in the
do.
morning,
So sweet. There's nothing
but
to
I
do.
did hear
There's
red-eyed
nothing to
Muriel
do.
up in the tree.
There's nothing to do. There's nothing to do.
At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the sun was beginning to march towards the western horizon. Another slug of rum, a few more bites of my sandwich. I took my sweater off because it was starting to get warm. 2 o'clock in the afternoon,
There's nothing to do. There's nothing
was
to do.
beginning to
There's nothing
lengthen.
to do.
3 o'clock in
There's
the
nothing to do.
afternoon,
There's nothing to do. There's nothing to do. There's nothing to do. There's nothing to do. There's nothing to do.
Oh, sweet Canada,
Nothing to do.
Canada,
There's
5
nothing to
o'clock in
do.
the afternoon, the sun was over the western horizon, beginning to sink. And at 6 o'clock,
Sweet, sweet, sweet. I'm so sweet.
and at 7
sweet,
o'clock, the
I'm so
sun
sweet.
began to
Come to me,
evening, beautiful meeting of day and night. And at 9 o'clock in the evening, the sun slipped over the western horizon. Dusk turned into night. And by that time, I had another slug of rum and a bite of sandwich, and off I went home to try to sleep. So I did. So that's a fun activity to help kids understand the pulse of the forest. And did you hear how the bird songs were more in the morning and more in later afternoon? And that's the way it works in a forest. And you can go to different websites and find out what the real birds are saying. The black-capped chickadee says, "Sweetie," in the springtime. Okay, just move on to the next slide if I can. Satyricism. Say it, satyricism. It's a nice word. I mentioned it a lot, but really what it means is the sound of the wind through the trees. And if you really pay attention, you can hear a white pine is different from an oak, which is different from a trembling aspen. They all have their unique sound. I call them wind songs. So tune into the wind songs and maybe get kids to the journal and get to recognize some of them. And speaking about that, you can create little nature musical pieces by having kids take natural objects to begin to experiment with the sounds and create a piece. It might start by rubbing sticks together and clacking them, and then rubbing leaves and shuffling your feet. You know, the sensory scavenger hunt. I have a link to this, but kids can try to feel different textures, from the roughness of bark to the smoothness of a leaf to maybe the sharpness of a stone. They use a clothespin to recognize what they found. I love feely bags, so putting special nature objects in and getting kids to slip their hand in and try to figure out what's in there. Or a blanket where everyone lies on their belly and you slide your hand under the blanket. Maybe you're feeling a pine cone or a rock or a bone. You could try a blindfold walk where you string rope up and then have kids take one shoe off, one shoe on, and just walk, and you'll feel the difference between the sunlight and the coolness of the forest and the different textures of grass versus leaves. You could even take it a bit further and do some sensory walks. Oh, nature is full of wonderful smells. One of my favorite things is just to take different evergreen needles, fir and hemlock and spruce and white pine, put them each in a little pouch or a sock. It could be just a laundered sock, and then get kids to smell it and see if they can find that smell in the forest. I love collecting buckthorn berries, or blueberries will work too. You can get that at your grocery store. Just mix it with a little bit of vinegar and heat it up until it's a slurry, and then pour it through a coffee filter. You've got beautiful ink. And you can use natural paint brushes to paint the landscape. There are so many wonderful things to taste, and a simple thing you can do, and pretty well everybody will have some of these, either a cedar tree or a pine tree. Just grab a handful, put it in boiling water, let it steep for 5 minutes, and you have a rich, pungent tea that tastes of the forest and is full of vitamin C. You know, kids have an incredible imagination. Let them use it. Create little gnome homes, little forts, or whatever story you want to use. And say, you know, can you keep your gnome warm? Here's some materials you might gather for that. I'm just mindful of the time, so I'm going to move on. One of my heroes is Drew Monkman. He's the guy I wrote the book with, the Big Book of Nature Activities. In the 1990s, he looked at it as Schoolyard, and he noticed it was just lawn. So he got together with the parent council, and he got together with his students, and they made a plan, and they began to plant. And that's that same space today. He's created a beautiful natural area. And you don't have to plant. You could even take a corner of the schoolyard and just let it go wild, rewild the schoolyard. And Drew has habitat helpers, older kids, directing younger kids. They created little field gardens. You can do this, and it doesn't have to be big. You can get the kids to build bird boxes, create pollinator gardens. Even just a little planter box at the base of a window will attract bumblebees, and honeybees, and monarchs. One of my favorite things to do is a stick-on bird feeder. This little guy, in the wintertime, I'll have birds constantly there, and I can be just a few feet from them, watch them up close. And then I'm connected to eBird, or iNaturalist, and I record and report what it is I found. And you can do that with kids, have a chart, see what they find. Use old pop bottles and make wonderful planters inside of your classroom, even if you don't have a very nature-rich schoolyard. Paul's favorite thing is vermicomposting, just a bin full of red regular worms. They work really well, it doesn't smell, and you can show kids how things like orange peels and banana peels turn into rich soil. Have a nature table, and that can be seasonally based. So I invite kids to take something from the nature table, but to replace it with something else. So the table is always changing over time. Now we're going to get to a little bit of some sensory activities that you can do, seasonal activities. One thing, if you have mushrooms where you are, you simply take the cap of the mushroom, put it on a piece of paper, and flip a glass over it, and the spores will fall down and make a wonderful spore print. People who study mushrooms know what kind of mushroom it is by the spore print. You can catch a spider's web. An orb-weaving spider will make a beautiful web that looks like a wheel. You just take a black piece of construction paper, gently push it against it, and spray with some hairspray, and you'll be able to catch it. Go for a walk. Get some old socks and put them right over your shoe, anywhere where there's some longer grass. And it's pretty miraculous, but some seeds will stick. And if you think about it, the fact that there's always more plants growing, even though plants can't move, the fact that they have the ability to spread their seeds is pretty amazing. From stick-on seeds to wind dancers to seeds that animals eat and poop out. Ingenious ways of spreading seeds. Just want to look at the time and, okay, I don't have a lot of time left, so I'm going to skip this next one because we're going to make a tree together. I think we're running out of time. Good. Try tree tag, where you recognize a few trees in the neighborhood, and then whatever tree people are touching, they're safe. But you can change that up. So say cedar, ash, oak. Making leaf shapes using a rope and holding up an oak leaf or a maple leaf and seeing if they can recreate the exact shape. Trees are amazing. Like right now, if you want to just grab a handful of sunlight for me, cram it in your mouth and chew, that's what you call a light snack. Trees they actually can take the sun's energy and make their own food, make a sugar. And while they're doing that, they're uptaking carbon, they're giving out oxygen, and they're also releasing water. One experiment you can do is take a bag and tie it on a group of leaves in the late spring, and come back in a while, and you'll see how much water has been transpired out. A mature tree can transpire 3,000 liters of water. You can do stained glass windows, simply taking different colored leaves in the AM and pressing them between wax paper and letting the light shine through them. I love this. Just take a clothespin, put your student's name on it, attach it to a leaf, and then come back repeatedly and see how that leaf changes over time. Take pictures of it and watch how it changes colors and eventually falls off. You can make leaf names. Sometimes kids say, where do those colors come from in leaves? They've been there. All you have to do is take some green leaves and put them in some rubbing alcohol, grind them up, take a coffee filter, just cut it into a long strip and watch how the colors migrate up. So in a few hours, you'll see yellows and you'll see oranges, maybe reds and greens. Those are different types of chlorophylls. You can even combine different subject areas, math. I love the Fibonacci sequence because nature is based on that. The Fibonacci sequence was discovered 1,000 years ago. There was a fellow by the name of Fibonacci who was a merchant from Italy, and he noticed this pattern, which goes like this. The first two numbers yield the next, so 0 plus 1 is 1, 1 plus 2 is 3, 3 plus 5 is 8, and so on. Turns out that nature is based on that sequence. You take the area, and when you do the Fibonacci sequence, you get a spiral. So many things are based on a spiral. From an unfurling fern, to how the scales are arranged in a pine cone, to how seeds are organized in a sunflower, even the way leaves are organized on a tree. You can measure the height of a tree in your schoolyard. You simply take a stick that's as long as your forearm, hold it vertically so you get a nice triangle, and then just keep walking back until you can see that it's the same height in your eye as the height of the tree, and measure from where you are to the base of the tree, and that's roughly the height of the tree. And I've itemized how to do that. Or with a pine tree, you can count how old it is. When a pine tree first grows, it takes about 3 years before it develops a whorl. And the whorl is simply like the spokes of a wheel. That's how the branches grow. And then you simply count every whorl. After the 3, it gives you a rough idea of the age of a pine tree. Well, there's tree faces out there. And if you start getting kids to look for these, you'll find them. Journals are wonderful ways. Kids can go to there's a special spot in their schoolyard or nearby, and keep going through the months of the seasons and writing about what they're seeing, hearing. And you could use that as a way of assessing how much they've learned. Take an old pumpkin, make a pumpkin feeder. And I'm recognizing I'm running out of time, so I'm going to skip a few to walking in the woods, fishing. One of my favorite things. Making that noise makes chickadees intensely curious. I've had as many as 60 chickadees around me by making that sound. I call it bird whispering. Scientists think it mimics scold calls, and chickadees come in to investigate. You quick winter activities, catch snowflakes. Get a piece of black crystal board, laminate it, leave it outside, and on a day where it's about -5 and there's not much wind, catch snowflakes and look at them through a magnifying glass, and you'll see beautiful dendrite crystals, hexagonal plates. Go to snowcrystals.com, and there are actual pictures of snowflakes. There's 2 examples, a whole bunch of them. Fill a balloon full of water, leave it overnight in the freezing temperatures, and then punch out the bottom, and you'll get a beautiful candle holder. I'm inspired by Andy Goldsworthy. Look his name up. He's a nature sculptor from England. He uses his hands and natural materials to create these beautiful nature sculptures. Show kids pictures of the nature sculptures, get them to create them. Here he's breathing icicles together. There he's packing snow. The traditional Haudenosaunee game called Snow Snake. You get a piece of down, sand it down, and coat it in wax. It'll slide over the surface of the snow. The Haudenosaunee used to do this, and on a cold winter's day on the ice, they could send that snow snake sliding half a kilometer. Or frozen mandalas. All of these are just different ways to appreciate the gift and the beauty of nature. Before we run out of time, quickly go to spring activities. Believe it or not, use a stethoscope and you can hear the sap rising in a maple tree. Pick a tree that's about 8 to 10 inches in diameter. Right in March, when the sap is starting to rise, you'll hear vroom, vroom. I'm going to include a link to this. There's just so many shades of green in the springtime. And here is my green sheen challenge. Can you find different plants that exactly match those shades? That helps kids appreciate just the vast number of shades out there. You could do some nature weaving. Take a forked stick, line it in some yarn, and then put some plants in. Or take some brown eggs and speckle them, and then hide them, and see if the kids can find them. There's a lot of birds that nest on the ground, like turkeys, grouse, killdeer, and they have intricately patterned eggs that help them to camouflage. You can even build bird nests by getting some mud and grass and weave them all together. You know, birds are amazing avian architects. The oriole that makes this beautiful woven hanging basket, to the robin that makes the cup nest. And getting kids to make a nest helps them to appreciate what birds have to go through. The robin will take over 2,000 trips each time with a little bit of mud in it, a few fibers of grass, and it's. I think we're running out of time, are we not?
Yes, 5 minutes.
Let's also, we were talking about the soundscape. In springtime, the frogs begin to sing. I welcome you to unmute your mic. And we're going to just do a Ontario frogs. They sing for the same reason birds do. If we could translate bird and frog into English, something like this. Hey, I'm a boy frog. If you're a girl frog, come on over. But if you're another boy frog, back off. And every species has their unique call, and you can get kids to recognize them. Let's practice together. So you unmute and repeat after me. This is the spring peeper. Beep, 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 beep. The leopard frog has a throaty toad, not a frog, but it has an interesting the bullfrog. Drew, the person that I wrote the book with, he used to give kids homework and say, I want you to go with your parents to a wetland. I want you to really listen. Put your ears on and listen. And then report back what you hear. You can go to Frog Watch and actually hear the real frogs calling. And frogs are bioindicators. Their skin is very sensitive. So a lot of frogs calling in a wetland. You know the water quality is pretty healthy. Not so many frogs, maybe the water quality isn't so healthy. You can raise butterflies. Here's a Cecropia moth that I raised with my wife Jessica, and a Polyphemus moth. In the end, I have a guide for how you can get cocoons to raise your own silk moths, which are just beautiful. They don't have any mouth parts, they're not going to bite. The colors are amazing. Teachers from Monarch shows you how to raise monarch butterflies, and poor monarchs are in trouble, and how enthralling it is for kids to be able to see a monarch go from a little caterpillar to a mature adult, and to let it go. It flies all the way 4,000 kilometers into the Sierra Nevada mountains in Mexico. How incredible is that? You can dance like bees. I would show you if we had more time, but basically you stand up, you join me, and just waggle your abdomen. The scout bees that go out come back, and by their waggles are able to tell the other bees what direction and how far the flowers are. So I hide flowers in the schoolyard and I do a dance, and the kids have to figure out where the flower is based on my dance. It has to do, the more waggles, the further the flowers are.
Mhm.
It has to do with the angle of the sun to the flowers. You can even make magic butterfly goop. You take fermented bananas, pour some beer in, there's a recipe there, and you just paint it with a bunch of different things, and the butterflies and the moths will come. Yes, you can make hammered leaves. How do you do that? You take some leaves and hammer them into a t-shirt or a piece of cloth with a hammer, and all the pigments go right in there. Worm fiddling? What are you talking about, Jacob? Well, there are actual international worm fiddling competitions. What happens is you take a stick with rough edges and you rub it with another stick. The vibrations cause the earthworms to rise up because they think it's raining. And there are people that are really good at this, and maybe you'll be one of them. Nature Earth. Andy Goldsworthy again, this time in the spring. Isn't that beautiful? Show the kids pictures and see what they come up with. Here's some that our students did. Now, I really am careful about making sure to practice what I call reciprocity. Whatever we take, we give more. So we'll harvest a little bit from here, a little bit from there. As Robin Wall Kimmerer says in her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, let's think about the honorable harvest. So whenever we harvest something, and I plant something, give back. There's a few more.
Sort of time, Jacob.
Okay. So I'm at the end. I know there's so many more things I'd like to share with you, but hopefully that gives you a smattering of ideas of how you can use your schoolyard in different ways through the seasons and principles. Get out there with your kids. They'll love you for it. They'll be happier and healthier. So I have a sheet full of resources that I can share with you folks. And I'm not sure how to do that, but maybe we can email it out to folks.
Can you have, is it a PDF? Can you share it on the chat, Jacob?
It's a Word document, but I can try sharing if it will let me. Not share.
You'll also be able to post it on the conference website.
Okay.
So
Oh,
if I-
wonderful. Yes.
Maybe people can just.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some on citizen science, on biodiversity, and hints for how to naturalize schoolyards, scavenger hunts, whatever I could think of, I threw in there. And I also put my email in. I love it when people email me and I share resources. That makes me happy.
Okay.
I'm sorry there isn't time for questions. Or maybe,
Yeah, I think, Jacob, people would like to know, was most of what you had in your slideshow, was it in your book?
a lot of it is, not everything, but a lot of it.
Okay. And what's the best way to get your book so that you benefit and Amazon doesn't?
You can buy it directly from the publisher, and in there I have a link to the publisher. It's New Society, and then that way they're a small publisher out west, and I'm sure they'd appreciate it.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can also check out Jacob on YouTube. During the pandemic, he's created a series of short video clips filmed outside showing various things that you can do with children.
Yeah, they're called Nature Notes, Jacob's Nature Notes. And as well, I have another book coming out, and it'll be all around sensory awareness activities. Same press, New Society Press. So it'll come out in the spring of 2022. I hope that was helpful.
That was lovely. I found my nervous system just relaxing, watching the slideshow and feeling just that little bit of connection to nature just from the description of the activities. I could feel the impact it was having. So
Good.
thank you very much.
It was my great pleasure, and hopefully people will get outside.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jacob. You share so many wonderful ideas. We had a great time watching them all. A few people have asked whether you're able to share your slide deck, but I'm guessing there might be some copyright issues with some of the images.
Yeah, I wonder. I'm happy. How about if people want the slide deck, they can email me and I'll take responsibility for that. And I'm happy to share it. Just check the camcorder.ca, it's in there.
Okay. Also, this presentation is being recorded. So
Oh,
I think it would be possible to get the recording just to hear it one more time.
Yes, in due course, the recording will be posted on the conference website.
okay. Great. Well, best of luck with the conference. And yeah, it's nice to share some time with you all.
Thank you very much, Jacob. Thank you, everybody, for coming along this afternoon. We hope you enjoyed it. I know the audio wasn't the greatest quality at times, but the pictures, I think, did a lot to make up for that.
Yeah, so yeah. I know I crammed a lot in, but hopefully it worked.
Yeah, I feel like you found a really good balance between providing a lot of ideas and information and also speaking slowly, so that people could manage the tremor in the audio. There was a bit of a tremor.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, I don't know what that is. Maybe I need a new microphone.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to close this session down now.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you
well-
very much, Jacob.
Thanks for your help, Brenda, and
Yeah.
thanks for a great talk, Jacob.
Yeah,
Thank you. That was lovely. Really
it was
lovely.
nice to be with you all. Thanks so much.
Okay.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.